Committee room.
Session. So members, just to remind you, the meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. I've been asked to remind you again to be conscious of the new audio and video equipment in committee rooms is significantly sharper. This means that when a committee is meeting in public session, side conversations are likely to be picked up by microphones. Nobody in the public gallery. The Dallo, yeah, well, I count her as being part of the committee. So members, if there are any additional interests to declare, now is the time to do it, but they have been recorded from our first meeting. Okay. We have apologies from Declan McAleer, the Vice Chair, and from Michelle McElveen. Have we any other apologies? No? No other apologies. There's just one item in the Chair's business today, and that is in pages 5 and 6 of your pack, and it's summarising the high-level points that were discussed in an informal meeting with the Vice Chair, myself, the Clerk, and the Ulster Farmers Union on Monday the 19th of February 2024. The meeting covered various issues including TB, Future Farm Support Scheme, Lough Neagh, BVD and lack of support in the sheep sector. Farmers Union are briefing the committee formally on Thursday the 21st of March 2024. Are you happy to note that? The minutes of the notes of that meeting. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 3 is the draft minutes. I refer you to the draft minutes dated 29th of February 2024, which are in your pack at pages 7 to 19, and those of the 5th of March 2024 in your table papers pack at pages 3 to 5. Have you any comments on any of those 2 minutes? No? You happy that I sign them?
Yep. Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, have we any matters arising of agenda item 4? I don't. No, okay. Okay, members, we're now going to receive 2 briefings, one from Climate Change, Science and Innovation. So I would welcome officials, Pauline Rooney, Claire Cockerell, Jean Corduroy and Alistair Carson. You're all very welcome here today, and thank you for your attendance. Members, you can find the briefing in pages 22 to 62 of your pack, and the Dear First Day brief, and in pages 63 to 88 for the paper on the Dear Key challenges. Following the briefing, I'm assuming officials will be open to questions, as you always. Okay, over to yourselves. I don't know who's leading. Pauline?
I'm leading off. Yeah,
okay.
Tom, so thank you very much. So thank you for your time today. I'm Pauline Rooney, one of the 4 directors from Climate Change, Science and Innovation Group, or CCSIG for short. I'm representing Deputy Secretary Tracy Teague today, who cannot be here in person, and she sends her apologies to the committee. I'll provide you with a brief introduction to the group and what we do. Then I and my colleagues, Alistair, Claire, Jane and myself will be happy to address any questions that you have. The Climate Change, Science and Innovation Group was formed in October 23. It brings together the policy and delivery aspects of DAERA's climate change work, as well as incorporating the key role played by science and innovation across DAERA. Being new, it is currently a small group with around 125 staff and a budget of approximately 10 million. The majority of this is salaries with a small amount of capital spend. There are 4 divisions in the group. Jane is the Director of Climate Change and Green Growth Policy Division, and she is responsible for developing policy and legislation in respect of climate change to deliver on the requirements of the Climate Change Act Northern Ireland 2022 and the UK Climate Change Act 2008. I was putting myself back a century there. This includes carbon budgets, public body reporting, climate change adaptation and mitigation, the UK emissions trading scheme, and bringing forward proposals to establish the Just Transition Commission. Other responsibilities include UK Climate Change Committee sponsorship, and participation in the UK Net Zero and Energy Interministerial Group, as well as climate change communications and stakeholder engagement, where we are looking at how behaviour change can support decarbonisation. Claire Cockrell is Director of Green Growth and Climate Action Delivery Division, which is responsible for coordinating the development of Northern Ireland's first Climate Action Plan, setting out how Northern Ireland will work towards reducing carbon emissions. It is also responsible for developing the draft Green Growth Strategy on behalf of the Executive, and subject to its agreement, leading a programme of work to deliver on the commitments in that strategy, which set out a long-term vision for tackling the climate crisis. In delivering these significant developments, the Division has been working alongside experts from the Strategic Investment Board. In addition, the Division also identifies and supports businesses who are developing and delivering green growth outcomes, and this team also coordinates the Interdepartmental Biomethane Group. Alistair Carson is DAERA's Chief Scientific Advisor, and he and his team are responsible for overseeing the commissioning and management of research and development programmes to meet DAERA's evidence and innovation needs, as well as providing strategic advice on science-related issues across the department. DAERA's research portfolio has been increasing to help address key challenges facing the agri-food, environment and rural sectors, but also to realise opportunities. Of particular note is the recent establishment of 2 new research and innovation co-centres focusing on climate and sustainable and resilient food systems. Operating on a north-south, east-west basis, these 2 new co-centres are funded by DAERA, Science Foundation Ireland and UK Research and Innovation, and they will be based on partnership working between academics, industry, policymakers and wider stakeholders. These exciting new co-centres will very much complement our existing well-established research portfolio. Alistair, in his role as Chief Scientific Advisor, represents the Department on scientific matters, including liaison with other departments, devolved administrations and academic experts. For example, Alistair has led the establishment of a scientific advisory group on water quality with leading scientists from across the UK and Ireland, which is feeding into the ongoing review being undertaken by DAERA on the blue-green algal blooms and water quality issues facing Lough Neagh. He also chairs the Cross-Departmental Evidence and Analysis Group, which is advising on quantification of carbon emissions for the Northern Ireland Climate Action Plan. Finally, my own division, Innovation and Science Transformation, leads on the DAERA Science Transformation Programme. DAERA is a science-based, data-driven department. Science evidence is used to inform, monitor and evaluate policy development and help meet statutory obligations. It provides the basis of advice and information, helps manage risk to society and the environment, and supports rural development. Importantly, science also underpins innovation. DAERA published its Science Strategy Framework in 2020. The purpose of the Science Transformation Programme is to implement this strategy and deliver a vision that DAERA science will be innovative, collaborative and transformative. The programme involves working with all DAERA business areas that commission and use science to develop and agree new strategic science policies and governance and operational systems, which when introduced will enable DAERA to get the best science, get the best value for science and make the best use of science. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of the responsibilities of the group. Our group is extremely cross-cutting and we liaise closely with colleagues across DAERA and all other government departments, particularly in relation to Northern Ireland's Climate Action Plan. To finish, we thought it might be helpful to give you an update on some of the key areas of progress we expect to be bringing to you before the summer recess. In early 2020, DAERA commenced work on the development of the Green Growth Strategy. Green growth means recognising and accepting the impact we have on our planet and doing something about it. So the draft Green Growth Strategy was developed as a multi-decade approach, balancing climate, the environment and the economy. The Executive agreed the draft strategy in October 2021 and it was launched for public consultation in November 21. The consultation responses indicated wide support for the approach and we will be seeking your views over the next steps regarding the Green Growth Strategy. In parallel to the Green Growth Strategy, work commenced on Northern Ireland's first climate change bill, with the Act coming into force in June 2022. The Act sets timeframes and the priority has been to focus our limited resources on the key actions that have a statutory deadline. This includes carbon budgets, public body reporting on climate change, and publishing a climate action plan. One of the first statutory duties under the 2022 Act is public body reporting. Here, there has been significant engagement with public bodies and key stakeholders, with a public consultation during 2023. The summary of responses to that consultation was published in January. Jane can say more about this, but we will be bringing the draft SL1 and regulations to this committee for views during the spring. The Climate Change Act also requires DAERA to set 5 yearly carbon budgets, and these must be set at a level that is consistent with meeting the 2030, 2040 and 2050 greenhouse gas emission reduction targets as set out in the Climate Change Act. A consultation on the proposed carbon budgets and reduction targets was held between June and October 2023. Extensive public engagement took place with 21 events held and over 700 participants. Jane will be happy to give you an update on that engagement and the consultation findings, as well as the next steps for setting the carbon budgets. Additionally, the Act requires DAERA to prepare and publish a climate action plan. Each sector has a lead department that is responsible for collating the policies and proposals which will deliver emission reductions in that sector in order to meet the carbon budget. DAERA leads on 4 sectors within the climate action plan, and these are agriculture, waste, fisheries, and land use change and forestry. Other key departments include economy, infrastructure, communities and finance, although all government departments have a role to play. An unprecedented level of collaboration across departments is required to deliver a climate action plan that is ambitious, evidence-based and fair. While further work is required before the climate action plan can be agreed by the Executive, significant progress has already been made. A 16-week consultation will take place when the draft climate action plan is published, and we look forward to engaging with this committee on the content of the draft plan in advance of this. Progress has also been made in policy development to support the establishment of a Just Transition Commission, and it is hoped that a consultation on this will be launched before the summer recess. During 22 and 23, there has been a lot happening with the UK-wide emissions trading scheme, with the publication of several consultations. I know the committee has already considered some of the SIs and that a briefing is being planned as part of your forward work programme, so I will not add much more at this stage. Under the 2008 Act, we also have a key role in relation to climate adaptation and resilience, which has become more evident as we begin to see the impacts of climate change locally. DAERA coordinates the development of the Northern Ireland Climate Change Adaptation Programme, NICAP, and work on the third adaptation programme is due to be completed this year. And this will be the subject of consultation later this year, and again, we intend to bring this to the committee. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of our work. I know it was quite long, but we're involved in an awful lot of things, and we're happy to take questions.
Okay. Any of your colleagues, Pauline, want to add anything at this stage?
No, I think if you have
That's okay, thank you very much. Yeah, obviously climate change is a massive issue, and I noticed you talked about working on a £10 million budget, of which most is going in salaries and staffing issues. Did note at an earlier briefing we got the figure of that it was going to cost departments £2.3 billion to implement climate change between now and 2027. Is that money budgeted for?
Take that one, yeah. So as part of the development of the draft climate action plan, we have been gathering the policies and proposals from departments. So that is at a development stage. As part of that work, we had done some indicative work to estimate the costs associated with implementing those. So that's a very indicative figure that you've referred to, and the work is ongoing to refine that. So as we refine the policies and proposals, we'll also be doing additional work to refine the cost of implementing that. Budgets, as you're aware, haven't been set for next financial year, but as part of that process, the policies and proposals would form part of the ongoing budget, that ongoing budget process. So there's still work to be done, and there's still work that is ongoing in order to fully cost a final plan, and that would obviously be once we're in a stage to agree all of the policies and proposals that formulate the climate action plan.
Would it be fair to say, Claire, that either the amount that it's going to cost is not finalised and the budgets aren't finalised for it? So at this stage, there is no indication of where that finance might have to come from.
So it would be for departments to be bidding through the budgeting process.
They will have to bid for it separately, is that fair?
So some of the costs will occur to DERA, so DERA will some of those costs, but other departments will also incur the cost of implementing policies and proposals. Yeah.
And have we any idea what it will cost the wider public, either businesses or public households?
Not at this stage, and again, that's work that we're just embarking on, so it's very important that we understand the macroeconomic impact. So we're kicking off an exercise to do that, to understand the impact on the wider economy. I think it's important just to say as well that investment in the policies and proposals to address climate change really is an investment in improving our society for the future, and it's really important that we have an understanding of the true value of the benefits associated with that. So that is ongoing work as part of the Climate Action Plan development process.
Okay. The targets that are within the Climate Change Act, how difficult will they be to meet?
I think they're very challenging. They are very stretching. The carbon budgets are obviously yet to be set, and maybe Jane can say a little bit more about that. But undoubtedly, they are very challenging to set us on the trajectory to achieve net zero. Obviously, at the beginning, we obtained advice from the Climate Change Committee as to what the targets and the interim targets should be, and consulted on that as part of the carbon budget process. The policies and proposals that we have gathered from departments, it is challenging to achieve the targets that we think we need. And again, that is part of ongoing work. It's been extremely challenging in the absence of ministers as well. Obviously, this will require transformational change, and it will require new policies and proposals to be brought forward. So there is an opportunity with ministers now in post to review those policies and proposals with ministers so that we are achieving the statutory targets that are in place.
Was it even more difficult because the Act didn't implement the Climate Change Committee recommendation?
I think the Act went through the processes of the Assembly, and the decision was made. I mean, from the Department's perspective, that those are the statutory targets that we need to produce a climate action plan to achieve. So, as I said, it is extremely challenging, and those are stretching targets. And we're working very hard across all departments. There's been a significant amount of engagement to identify policies and proposals to achieve those targets, but it is challenging.
Sorry, Jane, yeah.
Just wondering, like, in terms of what Claire was saying, that's probably linked in terms of, you talked about the impact on people in terms of just transition. Do you know, we've recently done work with the University of Nottingham, and in terms of, they've talked about our Climate Change Act being the most advanced in terms of social justice issues, because it has the financial, social, economic impact assessments requirements within the Act, and also has just transition principle and objectives running right through it. So departments will, in terms of the policy proposals, also have to adhere to the just transition principle as far as they can, and those 11 objectives within it too.
Just one final one for me. Around the carbon budgets and carbon action plan, I'm not sure what stage all this comes in. Have we missed any targets so far?
Yes, we have. We've missed 3 statutory targets, and I think you'll see me again quite frequently over the next few weeks as we try to match those. So the first one would be the public body reporting should have been operational on the 6th of December, and the carbon budgets should have been set by the end of December. So those are 2 that we've missed. The emissions reduction targets we consulted on at the same time, they're due before June, but we have worked at pace to have those ready for incoming ministers. The carbon budgets are draft affirmative, so they require an Assembly debate, so we couldn't make those without the Assembly, but we've done all the preparatory work. We had 2 very extensive consultation on public body reporting over 13 weeks, and we did the analysis of that, and as Pauline said, the response, the synopsis to that was published in January. So that will be going, now that is cross-cutting, so it'll become to committee and to executive, but that will be in a matter of weeks that you'll see an SL1 in relation to public body reporting. And then on the carbon budgets, again, that's cross-cutting, will have to go to executive and committee as well. But we had an extensive 16-week public consultation on the carbon budgets, and I'm sure committee are aware, we took the advice from the CCC, but we also took the opportunity, because they're just 3 figures, but we took the opportunity to also present the Climate Change Committee's recommendations and their pathways as well, to kind of illustrate to the public and key stakeholders what that actually means, what sort of actions that might be involved in. So and as Pauline said, we had 21 events, we had over 700 people attended, and we had over 235 responses. So we've analysed those, and we've put together a synopsis of those consultation responses now, and I'd like to see it. That'll probably be published in the next few weeks as well, and then shortly afterwards we'll be bringing regs to this committee.
Right, I'm going to bring other members in. Patsy McLowan.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. A number of things. The very laudable and the legislation, Climate Change Act and all that, we spent a considerable amount of time in this committee on it in the previous mandate. Now, could I just ask a number of things? Just transition, you referred to it as a principle. Insofar as how far does a principle be enacted in law, and in terms of actual weight that it's given, actual assignments of budget, actual practice, and in what way does the just transition, because as we know there are a lot of issues associated with the Climate Change Act, particularly for rural areas, and the impact of that wavers from the effects as it's perceived to be on the rural economies, and particularly farming economies and agri-food sectors, right across to the other side, which is Lough Neagh, and how the climate has been affecting Lough Neagh and the blue-green algae and that. Could you tell me just in what way does the just transition principle, which you referred to, what way is that taken into consideration with the rural needs assessment that there is an obligation on the department to do? Because there is a definite read across in terms of just transition is to make sure that people weren't unduly disadvantaged as a consequence of any legislation be coming through, and likewise any rural needs assessment should in fact assess where the impact of any government policy is likely to have an effect, good, bad or indifferent. So is there a read across between the two, and are the two going to be, if you like, merging one with the other to make sure that your assessed need is directing where just transition aid and support might go? And then secondly on that, is the department making a bid, I presume it is, for whatever financial requirements are needed to run with the just transition principle that you referred to? Now, there's that aspect of it, and if I could maybe just ask, the environmental improvement plan that's been referred to on a number of occasions and documentation we've seen here. Could you expand a wee bit for me on that, please, as to what in fact the environmental improvement plan is anticipated to do? Those are my 2 questions just for the moment anyway, Chair.
Just for the moment, okay, Patsy, thank you.
Just transitioning. You take it, just transition.
So I suppose in terms of the just transition principle, it is a requirement of the Act to take that into consideration in putting forward the policies and proposals that would be included within the Climate Action Plan. So that's something that departments will be doing, that they will need to be taking into consideration the impact of just transition, ensuring that the transition is fair, that it's supporting job opportunities, it's not, as you've said, disadvantaging disproportionately in any particular group. So that is very much something that is being done as part of the development of the Climate Action Plan and ongoing work. In relation to the Rural Needs Impact Assessment, that is also a requirement. So that would be one of the suite of impact assessments that's being conducted on the policies and proposals that are included, and then on the Climate Action Plan in its entirety.
Okay, thanks, Claire. And then budgets and bids for budgets and for the likes of, because just transition's fine as a principle, but in order to give it any effect, we have to make sure that there's support going with it, financial support.
Yeah, I suppose there's two answers to that. My team are developing proposals for establishing the Just Transition Commission. So we've been focusing on the requirements of the Act of statutory deadlines, but we've still been doing the policy development in terms of a Just Transition Commission. So the Act's really clear in terms of the functions that the Commission should have. So that's, providing advice to all departments and then also ensuring the policies comply with the Just Transition principle. And we have done an outline business case that's due to go to finance in terms of setting that up, and we've looked, we have very regular contact with Scotland, because obviously there's Just Transition Commission there, and looked at their costs. And we've also regular contact with colleagues in Ireland in terms of what they're doing in terms of Just Transition. And we've also taken a landscape review internationally and nationally in terms of how other governments are approaching and delivering on the Just Transition principle. So we've done and we've done a good bit of kind of different sort of consultation with various academics in relation to the Just Transition Commission as well. And we're actually separately working with Queen's to set up a series of Just Transition workshops with all of our sectoral leads that are working on the Climate Action Plan. I think in terms of, and just in terms of the Commission, it's likely to be an advisory executive body based on its functions. So the costs in Scotland are essentially the staffing. So it's not a huge cost, that, you know, in terms of setting up a commission, but I think it's a really vital cost in terms of providing advice and support to government departments on climate action. But we would hope that we would be coming within the second quarter with a consultation document in relation to that. I mean, partly because there's, I think, 7 areas that are listed that should be represented on the Commission, and then when we looked at the Climate Action Plan, there's other areas, maybe like transport or energy, that you think, well, you might want representation on that. And given, as you've mentioned, you know, issues in terms of agriculture and agri-food and rural communities, you might want broader representation of agriculture on that Just Transition Commission as well. So those are things that we'll likely go to a public consultation with quite soon.
Sorry, the only other thing to mention there would be the Just Transition Fund for Agriculture specifically, which is a requirement of the Act about providing advice and funding specifically to the agriculture sector to support the transition. And we understand that will be delivered through the Farm Support and Development Programme that colleagues within DERA are working on, and delivered through the annual ring-fenced budget for agriculture.
Okay, thanks, Claire. And then the Environmental Improvement Plan, maybe more details as what in practice it'll be delivering, or what it means.
Our colleagues that are coming in presentation next
All
are
right,
taking
okay,
forward
that's
the
grand.
Environmental Improvement Plan, so would be much better placed to answer the
Okay,
question.
thanks, Claire. Thank you.
It covers, as you know, a high-level strategy for improving all aspects of the natural environment. As Claire said, our colleague coming through afterwards will touch on it, but obviously it follows on from the consultation on the draft environmental strategy that was held earlier, but we picked up later.
Just a wee clarification, Claire, on the Just Transition around agriculture. You did say there that there will be a consultation coming out at some stage, is that right?
A consultation as part of the Climate Action Plan consultation.
And that'll include agriculture and that. And then you said that Just Transition payments will be through what?
We understand that the Just Transition Fund for Agriculture will be mainly provided through the annual ring-fenced agricultural budget.
And will that be part of the ongoing support mechanisms that agriculture gets, that we used to get through Europe and now through UK government? So will that directly come out of that budget?
I think I would have to confirm that with our colleagues in agriculture policy, and something we can come back to the committee.
Useful to get clarification whether it's separate or whether it's just part of that budget that already comes to agriculture. Because if it comes out of the budget that's already there, then I think agriculture and farmers will feel very short-changed. Anyway, sorry, Nicola Rogan. Next.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the four of you for your briefing there. I just want to actually pick up on something we've discussed with the Minister this week, and there's been ongoing discussion, I suppose, around the ammonia strategy and the changes that are going to come in there. And I see it is mentioned in the briefing paper of the key challenges that are facing the department. First of all, I wonder, could you explain to me the operational protocol? And I see you've made a note here that it will need ministerial consideration, but does that have to be approved by the executive moving forward? Do you know?
You know, again, just it's one like the Environmental Improvement Plan. Our colleagues following on will touch on the ammonia strategy, and we'll be able to confirm just the details around the operational protocol as well.
That's all right, I'll pick it up with them then, that's fine. Thank you.
Anya.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thanks for coming in this morning to us. I suppose my question is just actually leading off of Patsy's questions earlier on. In the Climate Change Act, under Section 29, in relation to due regard, it states that the Department must give due regard to the special economic and social role of agriculture, including the distinct characteristics of methane. Now, in your opinion, what measures do you consider that the department has taken thus far in order to provide due regard? And going on from that, I suppose, again, in your own opinion, how would this key protection actually enable farmers to continue to produce high quality and sustainable food?
Can you take that one?
Yeah, certainly, sure. Well, within the consultation on the carbon budgets and outlining the departmental's response to the Climate Change Committee's pathway, the emphasis was placed on exploring the options to develop a range of programmes within the department's Farm Support and Development Programme. And yeah, the aims would be to reduce emissions by improving efficiencies, technical efficiencies, and changing practices in farms whilst ensuring that the continued development and production of high quality food and delivering for our economy. So it was really placing a really significant emphasis on improving technical efficiency through the support in terms of a genetics improvement programme, in terms of driving a beef sustainability package, in terms of technical improvements, in terms of reducing age of first calving and slaughter age, which reduces the number of non-productive older animals on farms themselves. And also looking at the potential for new innovations to come into play. And in fact, we have DEFRA and with ourselves as a strategic partner have just launched recently a livestock dairy emissions reductions research and development programme to happen on farm, looking at the potential for feed additives in practice to reduce methane emissions whilst maintaining production. But also I think importantly that research will also be looking at the potential through precision nutrition to reduce nitrogen losses to the environment, including ammonia, and phosphorus losses to waterways themselves. So it's really using science and the application of science to deliver reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, but while also looking to sustain food production.
And I suppose there's a balance, obviously, with all that as well. And I suppose from a local point of view, and obviously Tom and myself share the same constituency, but from what I'm picking up from farmers, that there's a huge education piece there that's required on the department's behalf, because the way I see it is that there's a lot of change that will be taking place over the next few months and years, and unfortunately farmers feel left behind,
And I agree, the knowledge exchange and education piece is really, really important. And for example, there's training packages put into the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, for example, which is really important. That integration from science, education, and knowledge exchange is really, really important in addressing what are big challenges, but also opportunities.
Thank you.
Right on you. Thank you. John Blair.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you all here today. First of all, you're very welcome, and thanks. I want to put thanks on record for all of the work you've done before the Assembly restored through the green growth discussions and other programmes to keep us involved and informed. I suppose those processes were a reminder that there was a 3-year impasse here affecting the preparation for a Climate Change Act, and then a 2-year impasse affecting the implementation of the Act, and we're aware of that. Going back to the Lough Neagh situation, I suppose I want to frame this question around how we are mitigating against damage that's already being done, separate to work required for targets in 2030, 2040 or 2050, given that we know that the rise in water temperature was at least one of the contributory factors to the ecological crisis at Lough Neagh last year, and there may be others there and elsewhere. Is there continual analysis being done of that impact in the context of climate, and mitigations being put in place to try to reverse that now, as well as looking at future targets?
Alistair, do you want to address?
Yeah, thank you. Well, yes, turning to Lough Neagh, obviously, we think obviously in Lough Neagh we have a nutrient-enriched lake, both from a phosphorus and a nitrogen perspective. And globally, lakes which are nutrient enriched, the risk of harmful cyanobacterial blooms has increased globally, and unfortunately we've seen it locally. The impact of climate change has been through a number of mechanisms, we think. First of all, because obviously the increased water temperature, and the average annual mean for Lough Neagh recorded over the last 4 years has been above 11 degrees centigrade for each of those 4 years, which is something that was only achieved in peaked at 1 year previous over the last couple of decades. So there's a significant increase in water temperature, and in fact in the spring it was averaging 17 degrees. So it obviously increases the rate of photosynthesis in cyanobacteria, and consequently increasing the risk of blooms. It also increases we think the mobilisation of phosphorus from sediments in the lake. So it's causing enrichment from the sediment, which is built up over multi-decades. It also, as well as temperature, climate change is also increasing the incidence of heavy rainfall events. And from phosphorus losses from land are principally linked and aligned with heavy rainfall events. So unfortunately, climate change from a number of different approaches or mechanisms is having a detrimental effect. In terms of monitoring emissions and in Northern Ireland, there are plans, and we're looking at plans of monitoring actually greenhouse gas emissions around the lough as part of a wider UK network itself. In terms of mitigations, I think there are a number of mitigations options which have benefits from a number of environmental metrics. For example, the precision nutrition that I was talking about in terms of the agri sector reducing in a very targeted way the protein content of diets, and it has to be done very targeted so it doesn't have detrimental effects on production. Reduces nitrogen losses to both waterways and ammonia emissions. So that's an example of where there are benefits. And consequently, and also looking at issues such as the sustainable management of livestock manures, and that overall opportunity of looking at the biogas sector and the developments in the biogas sector and nutrient recovery are really, really important. So we're looking very much at synergies and opportunities for addressing all the environmental metrics at once. But unfortunately, we do have to also live with the issues around climate change happening and the increased risks that it's bringing to things like harmful blue-green algal blooms. And finally, so from a research and development programme, we're also looking at I lead a science advisory group which has been reviewing opportunities for in-lake management options as well, because we know because of the significant legacy issues there are in terms of sediment release of phosphorus, the high risk of harmful blue-green algal blooms is going to be with us for a very significant period of time.
Maybe just to add, because you asked what we're doing to enable us to do better around this and to monitor better. So we have been establishing a laboratory information management system across all of our labs. It's only starting to be implemented now, but that will enable us to get more timely information through, join up information, get information flow through faster. So that should actually enable us to do this better in the future.
Yeah. It's good to hear, Chair, that there's an analysis of and attention being paid to existing problems as well as future projections. On a separate issue, another contributory factor towards climate change is, of course, how we handle our waste and the amount of landfill and processes around that. And you will be aware that there are a multitude of systems operating across councils and sometimes within council areas. This is a reminder of the cross-cutting nature of many of the issues around climate, not only across our public sector and private sector, but even within DAERA, because all of the different divisions of DAERA have a role to play here, and maybe you'll be able to refer to some of the internal cooperation that's taken place. But on waste management specifically, the department was to launch a consultation before the end of the year. Is your unit watching developments around all of those things to see how the outworkings of those could impact the climate picture as well going forward?
This was our role, and you'll hear more on the policy development from colleagues that are following on from us. Our role has been, from a science perspective, is being able to put some numbers around what the impact of proposals and policies in the waste management sector would be, and of course, with particularly in relation to methane emissions, which is main greenhouse gas emissions from waste. So our role has been working with our policy colleagues, looking at the proposals, and then putting some numbers around that as part of quantification and looking at what that looks like in the overall pathway.
Okay, but you'll all be collaborating if, for example, there are conclusions from that delayed consultation. I understand it is now making progress. That you will be watching for that and taking that on board with your considerations in around climate as well.
Yeah, very much so, because the assumptions that are undertaken in terms of the analysis depend on reducing waste, increasing reuse and recycling rates, and reducing and putting restrictions on landfilling of biodegradable material. So obviously we're doing the exercises from a science perspective of, well, what impact does that have in overall Northern Ireland greenhouse gas emissions, and so we have close engagement as looking at those assumptions and seeing the policies coming into practice.
Thank you.
All right, John. Thanks. Tom Buchanan.
Thank you, Chair. Climate change is going to have a huge impact on the farming community, obviously, and the way things are done, the way they will have to be done in the future compared to what they're done at present, in the past, and so forth. And what level of ongoing engagement then do you still have with the farming community so that their voice is heard, their concern is addressed, that you have the buy-in from them in all the issues that you're seeking to take forward? Because without that then obviously it's going to cause further concerns and difficulties for the farming community on going forward. So it's best to have their buy-in as far as you can, or as much as you can on this, rather than simply having something then that's going to be imposed on them. So it's just about the ongoing level of engagement, the whole education around this and everything that you still have with the farming community.
Start on that. So there's been a significant amount of engagement as we've gone through the process of developing the policies and proposals to consider as part of the climate action plan. So that has included engagement with sector-specific stakeholder groups, and that's again a requirement of the Climate Change Act, that in putting forward policies and proposals for inclusion, that there is sector-specific engagements. Well, obviously that will include agriculture, and our colleagues in DERA who are bringing forward those policies and plans, policies and proposals will be engaging and are engaging as part of that process. There's been widespread engagement, across stakeholders generally, with the Green Growth Forum group, for example, which is comprised of industry representatives, members of the wider public sector, as well as voluntary and community sector organisations, just to bring them along through this process, and that's a very important part. We've already talked a little bit about the carbon budget consultation, and again, as part of that process, we also sought to take into consideration the views of public on the Climate Change Committee's advice about a pathway, so some of their recommendations about actions that we should be taking to meet the targets. So again, that was an opportunity to engage with sector-specific groups on some of those actions and to take their views into consideration. So there has been a significant amount of stakeholder engagement to date. We absolutely recognise it's very important that we're bringing stakeholders and members of the public along with us, and there'll be further opportunity to engage as part of the consultation on the draft climate action plan as well when that's launched. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything more.
Yeah, I think just from a science and innovation perspective, obviously we're saying just the huge role that science has to play in the future in developing new innovations, but also helping inform policy development and monitor and evaluate policy. The science that we are commissioning, we're always looking for it to be collaborative. and innovative and transformative because of the radical change that we're needing. And for example, the research project that I mentioned previously in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions through feed additives is going to be carried out on farms. And with a very significant knowledge exchange perspective and joined up with the CAFRE overall programme. So we know very much the need to have really close engagement with the industry in the development of new innovations right from the get-go. Also, there's really significant engagement in some of the key pillars in terms of actions. For example, in the development of the industry-led sustainable genetics programme, that's industry-led, and very much another key action in terms of producing more efficient animals and animals with lower methane emissions for the long term, and also in terms of the soil nutrient health scheme, that overall baseline and benchmarking of carbon stocks across Northern Ireland. So I think from a science and innovation perspective, it's an exciting time that there's going in working with the industry and all stakeholders in the development of it. And finally, just in our engagement and developing our priorities in terms of research and innovation, we're piloting a Northern Ireland Diamond approach, which has got representatives from industry, from farming organisations, from environmental groups, and from wider society. So I think that overall, balanced approach and engagement right across with all stakeholders is really important, and we're really striving to take a collaborative approach from a science and innovation perspective.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tom. William Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's becoming more and more evident that targets set within the bill are unachievable. As we move forward, if it becomes more clear that these targets are unachievable, many of them, what are the options for the department? I think most people accept, some of the experts accept that they're unachievable. Yeah. So.
When I say kick off, just from a science perspective, there's undoubtedly, the consultation on the carbon budget just highlighted just the challenge that there is in the development of a pathway to net zero. You'll have seen in that consultation that to get a pathway, the CCC advice was bringing on board both their stretch ambitions, as they put it, and also speculative options in terms of pathways which included, very extensive carbon capture and a stretch ambition or a tailwinds in agriculture. Those were recognised to be, really stretching. I think William really highlights the role of the need for new innovations to come forward, in the development of that pathway, because particularly as we go through into the later decades through to 2050, new innovations have to come through to meet the gap for net zero. In the more recent, or in the targets up more recently in the first carbon budget, again, they're stretching particularly in terms of adoption rates, with it, and that's what the challenge is going to be in the short term. So undoubtedly, and the CCC recognised that obviously in their initial work, which had overall pathway of 82% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. It is difficult to get to 100%, and that's recognised and was recognised within the carbon budget consultation. But there are huge investments going on in terms of science and innovation, and we're looking at the development of new innovations. So, for example, the co-centres programme on climate, biodiversity and water quality, which is an investment that we're making along with Science Foundation Ireland and UK Research and Innovation. And this is bringing together leading scientists from Northern Ireland working on a north, south, east, west basis, and we need that level of investment and attention to get science to deliver on what are really, really stretching targets. And no doubt about it, William, and that's recognised within the carbon budget consultation.
Some experts believe that the bill will need revisited because targets will be unachievable. What's your view on that?
Obviously, we'll produce the data, and I think most importantly is when we're producing data and analysis is to recognise the uncertainties around the data and just be transparent in the data itself. So from a science perspective, and I'll pass over to Claire and Jane on this, but from a science perspective, I think our role is, as well as the development of new innovations, but also in terms of quantification, recognising the uncertainties that are there and highlighting the assumptions on which the data is based.
I suppose just to say that this is a top priority for our minister. Meeting the statutory obligations and making sure that we Northern Ireland are taking action to mitigate the effects of climate change and adapt to a changing climate. So those are the targets that are in the Climate Change Act, and ultimately that's what we want to be working towards, as challenging as they are.
I would just say every other country and every other state is dealing with the same challenge, and they all have similar targets that we have here. And we've worked very closely across the UK through an interministerial group in terms of actions that's happening in England, Scotland, Wales, and we also work with colleagues in the South in terms of the actions they're taking, because there's a lot we can learn from other countries that are a little bit ahead of us in this journey, and there's lots of really quite innovative and exciting things that are happening that we could bring here. And I suppose given the flexibility of how small we are and the agility, there are things that we can trial here and do quite innovatively in Northern Ireland. Some of the things that Alistair's talked about in terms of agriculture, there's real opportunity for us on this journey to net zero. Yeah.
I think the difficulty for the Northern Ireland, we produce, the agri-food sector produces a lot of food for the UK. I think somewhere feeds in the region of 10 million people in the UK. That's why the Climate Change Committee gave us advice that in effect many in the previous mandate wouldn't listen to.
Okay, William.
Okay.
Two wanting very, very briefly, Patsy and Nicola, quickly.
Hi, thank you. Just picking up on William's point, well, there's two brief points. One is the level of engagement, particularly with the agricultural community, because I really don't think that some people are aware of what the challenges are facing them. So that's particularly important. Now, the second thing, can I just ask, in terms of peatland restoration, is that your bailiwick or?
It'll be touched on in terms of looking at the numbers, and the impact. We've done the assessments, but from a policy perspective, it'll be picked up by our colleagues just following shortly.
All right, that's okay. That's all right. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, you preparing to cut turf?
No, some people are, but the way we're going at the minute, the price of fuel, you wouldn't know.
Nicola.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for letting me back in. Alistair, something I just want to pick up on what you said about in terms of innovation in science and that kind of collaborative kind of work. And Jane, you touched on this as well. But what kind of collaboration or cooperation have you had with your counterparts in the South, given that we have like a shared environment and obviously the future of energy here on the island?
We've, as I said, from a science perspective, and I'll just cover it from a research and development perspective, we absolutely recognise the advantages of a collaborative approach in terms of funding, and that's part of our science strategy framework as our vision of a collaborative, innovative, transformative work. And the issues that we're dealing with and strategic challenges are global issues. So consequently, I think we've worked really closely and have commissioned work and do commission work jointly with the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine in Dublin, with the US and the US Ireland R&D partnership, which is a tripartite arrangement with the US, Ireland and Northern Ireland. We've also engaged really significantly with UK Research and Innovation, the research councils, which are huge investors in research, and we've got collaborative programs, and we've been co-funders in programs such as the Land Use for Net Zero program, which is a really important UKRI-led initiative, which we are co-funding into as well. So this really, leverages, and there's over £70 million worth of investment in those co-centres and the Land Use for Net Zero programme that I'm referring to, and it's really this scale of science investment that's required, and the bringing together of capacity and capability, and that's what we're really, really seeking to do, and I think are putting into practice for our department.
Right.
Just in terms of education, communication, comments that several members have raised, it's really, really important that we bring people along with us in terms of this. And I mean, I suppose it's worth saying, obviously, this committee is looking at agriculture and rural affairs, but every single sector is going to require significant transformation, and so we're communicating with as many people as we can and trying to, I suppose the carbon budget consultation also brought out quite a lot of fears people had and concerns, so that's one of the things we'll take away in terms of addressing that as we move forward to the Climate Action Plan. But it is worth saying, 81% of people in Northern Ireland, we were just looking at data recently, are concerned about climate change and want to see it addressed, and over 64% of people are concerned in terms of they want to see high urgency in action on it. So people are concerned and they want to see action in this area. And just to add to what Alistair said, the Climate Change Act does require us to coordinate policies as much as we can with the UK and Ireland. And my team look at just transition and behavioural change. We have quite regular contact with colleagues in relation to what they're doing in that. And shared, I know the Minister mentioned the Chief Executives Forum event last week on behavioural change, and we had the experts from across the UK and Pete Lunn from the South, who's the advisor to the government there. So there would be very close working relationships. And we also met with the Climate Change Advisory Committee and the EPA and look at their consultations, as well as obviously the Climate Change Committee in the UK as our statutory advisors.
I suppose just more generally as well, engaging with the departments in the south too. Just they've been through this process. I think they're on their fourth climate action plan. So we were recently down with them, which was extremely useful just to learn and share lessons learned. So with both the Department of the Taoiseach and the Department of the Environment there as well. So very good engagement. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, Pauline, Claire, Jane and Alistair, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of you over the coming months with climate change. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Members have been asked if we will have a very short comfort break. So while we change the top table or the guests, we'll have 2 minutes.
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room.
Yep. Thank you. We're back in public session here, members. So it's just to remind you again, we now have agenda item 6, which is a departmental briefing from senior officials from the Environment, Marine and Fisheries Group. So I welcome you officials here, Liz Loughren, Shane Duras, Fiona Dickinson, is it? Dixon, sorry, and Owen Little. You're all very welcome here, and you will find the briefing on pages 22 to 62 in your pack of the DAERA First Day Brief, and pages 63 to 88 of DAERA Key Challenges. So I'm assuming the officials will be open to some questions after their briefing, and just to let you know, if you didn't hear, your colleagues that were in before you passed nearly all the questions on to you. They said that it would be much better addressing that to the colleagues that come after, so there's a real onus on yourselves. But anyway, thank you, and it's over to you to know who's leading off.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity, both Mr Chairman and committee members, to present to the committee the really wide-ranging work of the Department's Environment, Marine and Fisheries Group. I'm going to give you a really brief overview of the group and mention some of the current hot topics, and then obviously there will be plenty of time for questions. So the aims of the group are to develop policy and effective regulation to protect, conserve and enhance our environment, to protect and ensure sustainable use of our seas and inland fisheries resources, to develop DAERA's policy and legislative responsibilities in relation to forestry and plant health, and to advise and support the Department in relation to retained EU law. So we've a budget of about £48 million worth of resource. That also includes income of nearly £12 million, and we also have about £9 million worth of capital. So there's 5 directorates within the group. There's the Forest Service, led by its Chief Executive, John Joe O'Boyle, and I think he's giving you a briefing in the coming weeks. There's retained EU law and support, led by the Director, Pauline Keegan. Shane Doris is our Director for Environmental Resources Policy. Owen Little leads our division on Natural Environment Policy and, on Marine and Fisheries Policy, and Natural Environment Policy is led by Dave Foster. Dave's actually leaving us tomorrow and is being replaced by Nelia Lloyd. So Fiona Dixon is here on Dave's behalf today. Starting with Forest Service, as I say, you're going to receive a separate briefing from Forest Service, so I won't cover its work today. On the retained EU law, the division was established really to support policy colleagues, make sure we provide a single departmental response to the retained EU law Revocation and Reform Act. It acts as a conduit between DERA and the Executive Office, and it also does an awful lot of engagement with the UK government and other devolved administrations on generic and cross-cutting issues associated with the Act. Natural Environment Policy divisions responsible for taking forward policy and legislation in relation to a number of areas, including air quality and noise pollution, local environment quality, which includes things like clean neighbourhoods and dilapidation issues. It's responsible for chemical and industrial pollution, for radioactivity policy, for water policy, which includes protection of river water quality and regulation of drinking water supplies and urban wastewater. And obviously that division has been very, very busy over the past months with the Loch Ness issues. We're also, Natural Environment Policy is also responsible for ammonia policy, natural heritage and biodiversity, environmental farming, and also the soil nutrient health scheme. Shane's division, Environment Resources Policy, is responsible for developing policy and legislation in relation to environment and waste. Marine and Fisheries Division has a statutory duty to sustainably manage inland and sea fisheries resources and to protect the marine environment. The division manages a fairly diverse range of functions from policy development and legislation, but is also involved in an awful lot of operational delivery and marine licensing tasks as well. So briefly, some of the specific issues that the group's dealing with at the moment, kind of big one, blue-green algae. You'll be aware, obviously, of the issues last year, its re-emergence recently, and the department's response. The incidence of blue-green algae, certainly last year, was so prolific it was impacting fisheries, both commercial and pleasure, and also recreational water users. When the crisis at Loch Ness emerged during the summer, we initiated emergency planning measures in response to the number of reported incidents of blue-green algae in the loch, but also the lower Ban and the North Coast beaches. And between ourselves and the Environment Agency, we established an operational task team. There was also then a water quality steering group and a review team which we led, and that comprised senior officials from DERA, NIEA, DFI and NI Water, and then there was a science advisory group as well which Alistair led, and I think he mentioned it in the earlier session. The steering group now and the review team were really close to finalising a set of evidence-informed recommendations that are going to be needed taken forward to secure longer-term improvements in water quality. We expect that document to be finalised, ready for the Minister's review very, very shortly, and would hope that we'll be able to release that shortly afterwards. We've also been looking at in-lake management measures and assessing those for viability, with pilots ideally on those starting this spring and summer. The Minister's also, in his short time in office, met stakeholders and the Earl of Shaftesbury, the owner of the bed and soil of the loch. I think everybody recognises on this one that there are no quick fixes at all, and it's going to require collective action across government, across private and public sectors, and also we have to involve the community in what we're doing and the way we're working. And also, and I think the Minister mentioned, emphasised this on Tuesday to you, this is not an issue that is of limited geographical reach. The river catchments for Loch Ness cover more than half of Northern Ireland, so this is a really dispersed issue. One of the next big topics on the Minister's agenda from us at the moment is the Environmental Improvement Plan, and in many ways that plan is going to have to provide the basis for lots of the issues, including Loch Ness. So it's required under Schedule 2 to the Environment Act. We've prepared the plan. There was consultation on it prior to the fall of the Assembly. We've had to do a bit of updating, but we are expecting the Minister to take that to the Executive for approval very shortly. As part of that process, we're also agreeing governance arrangements within the department, but also across the other departments to oversee all the commitments that are contained within the EIP. Okay. Next topic then, the ammonia strategy. We've been working on an ammonia strategy, and again this was something that we began a number of years ago and have continued while ministers haven't been in place. It's about trying to find a way to support our local farm businesses and rural communities, helping them to thrive and be sustainable while at the same time protecting the environment and also meeting the department's legislative requirements. The strategy is intended to deliver Northern Ireland-wide reductions in ammonia emissions, mainly through mandatory manure management requirements and also through additional voluntary measures. We put it out for public consultation in 2023, and there was a really, really high level of interest across all of the stakeholder groups, and there are really diverse views on the strategy as well. It is certainly something that people really want to input into and really have a lot to say about. There's also accompanying that new standing advice. That's what the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, on behalf of the department, uses to provide statutory advice on planning applications. So new advice is also being developed because we very much see that all as a single package. The Mavanaha Fish Farm and the public angling estates. I think it's fairly well known now that we detected zebra mussels, an invasive species, at the fish farm in June 2023, and that has resulted in us suspending stocking into the public angling estate to prevent their spread to other water bodies. We had to stop stocking under the 1985 wildlife order. It's an offence for any person to release zebra mussels or to allow them to escape into the wild. Since then, we've been working with AFBI to put in place a project to develop and assess treatment protocols for zebra mussels to ensure that any future stocking to the estate from the fish farm complies with the wildlife order. So I am expecting that work from AFBI to complete fairly soon. That will allow us to put options to the Minister in terms of future stocking for the public angling estate. Kind of finally then, just on retained EU law, at the end of 2023, almost 600 pieces of retained EU law or rule were repealed. The principle of supremacy of EU law and the general principles of EU law were ended, along with associated EU interpretive effects, and rule is now known as assimilated law. That was kind of a really large piece of work that all departments participated in, and there were lots of discussions around how we take that forward and how we deal with Northern Ireland specific effects. The process is still ongoing because there are a number of revocation SIs currently underway from the UK government which require input from DERA, the most recent ones being on food and drink. DEFRA plan to consult in early 2024. I know we notified this committee of the planned consultation on the 27th of February. Our policy teams have reviewed the legislation and how it relates to Northern Ireland. We've confirmed that the legislation, as far as we're concerned, is defunct. So the Minister has agreed that DERA be included in both the DEFRA-led consultation and also the DEFRA Central Revocation SI. Coming up for 2024, DEFRA has really ambitious plans in this area. They have a target of around 131, which is much higher than normal, SIs planned to be laid in 2024, although that may be subject to change. Around a third of those are rule-related. We are really closely engaged in that process to make sure that the department's views are well represented and that any concerns are picked up. So, thank you, Chair. I'm going to pause there. As you see, the work of the group is really wide-ranging. I've only touched on a few of the issues that are live at the moment, but obviously we're happy to take members' questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Liz, for that. I do appreciate it, and I know it's a very wide area of remit, and obviously even your budget would indicate that there's quite a lot of work ongoing there. Just a couple of questions from myself. The ammonia strategy, I did hear what you said, that there was a huge number of responses. There was a huge number of people had a lot to say about it. Where are you with it now, and what's the next stage?
Okay, I'll hand over to Fiona in a sec for the specifics, but I mean, just in terms, we have had really, really good engagement from all sectors on that. When I say people have a lot to say, there are some really, really strong opinions. Where we are, we've just completed the summaries of those consultation responses. We have a draft ammonia strategy that is almost complete. What we're doing at the same time is taking all the stuff that came through from the call for evidence for the accompanying standing advice, because as I say, we see this as a package, and working through that. Fiona, just on the specifics of that.
I don't have an awful lot more to say, except we've been working very hard. The consultation closed early last year, and there were around 500 responses to that. So we've been analysing those and using that information to rework the ammonia strategy. But we're at the position now where we are finalising it, and it will be taken to the Minister for him to consider before publication.
So when can we expect something public?
The reason I'm hesitating is because there's two processes going on here. The actual draft strategy itself, we expect to complete within the next couple of weeks. What we're doing at the same time in parallel is work on all the impact assessments. The impact assessments may take a little longer, so we don't have a firm date. In some ways, it's down to decisions about some of the decisions around the impact assessments and what level of assessment or screening goes on within those. So we'll be in a better position over the next few weeks to be able to be more definitive about dates when we know more about the level of work that will be involved in the impact assessments. The other issue then is the standing advice and the assessments and engagement around that. So it is coming forward as a package. It will be, elements of it are available very soon, but it will be up to the Minister as to how he wants to deal with publishing pieces or packages or...
Accepted. You did say it closed early last year, the consultation. What engagement has there been with organisations since then, if any? Or do you go back to some organisations to have further discussions with them up to now?
What we did is when the consultation on the strategy closed, we then opened the call for evidence on the standing advice. So as we have done the call for evidence and the engagement around the call for evidence, we've been back to organisations and stakeholder organisations and picking up the ammonia issues generally. So it's not been, okay, we finished consulting on the strategy, set that aside, and now we're going to do the next thing. It has all tended to, it's tended to be a continuous conversation. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think, during the consultation period, we had several public events that and really good attendance at those. So we had the opportunity not just to take views publicly at those events, but also what came back to us in written form as the consultation. In terms of what we've done since consultation closed is just keeping on board the stakeholders that we have in our representative organisations. But until we have finalised the strategy, we're not really able to go with, here's what the final strategy looks like to stakeholders, simply because that has to go to the Minister for a final sign-off, and it may change. So I suppose that will be when we have an opportunity to engage with our stakeholders again.
Would it be reasonable to say, since the consultation closed, you have been, I suppose, seeking clarification on some issues from those bodies that made representation, but not discussing maybe the potential outcome of what the new strategy will look like?
I think that's a fair summary. I think we've obviously the responses that came back to the consultation were detailed and did require some further engagement to seek views and opinions on what those details were and meant for the industry. But we'll have an opportunity again to do further consultation when we've the details finalised of what the final draft strategy looks like.
Okay, thank you. Just one other point. Loch Ness, whenever the blue-green algae issue arose last year, the statement came out from the department around not using or not eating fish that were caught at leisure, in your coarse fishing or whatever, but it didn't mention those in the commercial sector. So I'm just wondering what that was, because there was a lot of confusion around that time around that. So can somebody explain to me the issue there?
As Chair, so we take our lead from our advice from Public Health Authority and the Food Standards Agency, and the distinct difference is that fish that are caught commercially are looked at by environmental health officers and Food Standards Agency and therefore there's those checks. Whereas for recreational anglers, it was more a precautionary principle because there was no further checks. And I understand that the Food Standards Agency will be issuing further advice, possibly today, to clarify that from tests they've done, which should provide clearer direction for anglers about the consumption of fish they catch. So that should be imminent today or this week.
Okay, so last year would there have been additional Public Health Agency checks on fish that were caught commercially, or did the normal checks that they underwent?
So the Food Standards Agency undertook a programme to catch and test fish, various species, to analyse them and actually do a report. And I think the plan is that their press release and report will actually then publicise those results and the updated advice that is due, I think, this week.
Okay, even though it's 8 months later or whatever. We could, to be fair, I'm only saying because I got a lot of questions at that time. We could have done with a wee bit more advice at that particular time because it was confusing, but I'll leave it at that for now, all right. Nicola Brogan.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thanks to the four of you for your briefing here this morning. I want to go back to the ammonia strategy. You mentioned the draft strategy, hopefully being ready in a few weeks, but you're still going through the equality impact assessments. Can that strategy be shared with the Minister, the draft strategy, before the assessments are ready, or do they have to work together?
The draft strategy can, the Minister can see anything obviously that's produced within the department, but in terms of any advice that we provide him, it will be really setting out the process that we are going through in terms of developing the strategy and looking at the impact assessments.
And there's another question I'd asked the people that were in before giving the briefing about the operational protocol that's mentioned there and your key challenges. Can you first of all explain that to me and what exactly it means? And it mentions there about needing approval from the Minister. Is the Minister able to approve it himself, or does he need executive approval to get it to go forward?
Okay, the operational protocol, it's kind of known by several different names, which adds to the confusion. Right, the department has statutory duty to provide advice to planning authorities, and when there is a planning application, a proposal that might increase the amount of ammonia emitted into the atmosphere, the department is specifically asked to provide advice on that, and it's Northern Ireland Environment Agency acts on behalf of the department in providing that advice. There are two ways in law that we can provide that advice. Either we can have a set of standing advice in that we kind of give that advice to planning authorities and say, you know, here's our standard advice. If it's within these numbers, it's okay. If it's not within these numbers, it's not okay. And that's a really simplified way of putting it. Alternatively, what we can do is look at each thing on a case-by-case basis and provide advice. So the standing advice has been in place. The original set of standing advice, as far as I'm aware, was in place from 2012. And kind of over the years, it's become referred to as the operational protocol. So what we had got into a position where there were issues with the extant operational protocol standing advice and its read across to environmental law. That had effect where planning authorities were coming to us and were wanted more clarity and were having difficulties. Then towards the end of the year, there was an issue raised by the Office for Environmental Protection. The issue, when we took legal advice on it, it became clear that we could no longer stand over the operational protocol that we had at that point. And so we had to stop using the operational protocol that was in place. at the point at which that decision was made under the EF Act, we weren't sure when the Assembly would return, and although we were already working on a new operational protocol, we didn't know what the gap would be between one and the other. So in between times, we, and again, a decision under the EF Act, the decision was to go back to legislation and do a case-by-case approach while we were waiting for the new operational protocol to go in place. So, sorry, your final question about the approval mechanism, it will have to go to the Minister. The Minister will have to approve it. As part of that approval process, he may wish to consider whether he needs to seek the assent of his executive colleagues. That decision will be based on both advice and, I would imagine, legal advice that we will provide to him, but that will be very much his decision.
So at the minute, the Environment Agency is dealing with individual cases, case-by-case kind of detail. Okay. Okay, that's great.
Just on that, sorry, Chair, in relation to Nicola's last question there, apart from the case-by-case basis and the department looking at that, has there been any further engagement with farmers?
There has been there's been some discussion last week with the UFU, and I'm kind of hesitating on some of this because a lot of the engagement will take place through the NIEA, so I'm not 100% certain what is happening. But certainly at the meeting that I was at with the UFU last week, there was an undertaking by the department and NIEA to look at ways to better communicate this with the farming industry and explain the case by case and what is happening.
Okay. Thank you for that. I just want to go back on to Lough Neagh as well. I heard in the media this morning that there's green blue algae has been recorded again, and this apparently is quite early in the season for that there. What's been your response to this news compared to like what happened last year? If this is this concerning you basically, and what have you done about it?
I can answer the first part, but the second part is a matter for NIEA. But for the first part, yes, it's concerning, but it's expected. This is a problem that was 40 years in the making. It is not a quick fix. I'd mentioned in my opening remarks, we've done a lot of work on the science behind this, and one of the things that we are looking to do is look at, are there any short-term solutions that can make things better while we solve the big problem? So we would like to do some pilots in Lough pilots throughout the summer, and that will look at seeing if we can tackle this in a. It's not cosmetic, but it doesn't reach the root problem. So that will go on ahead. In terms of the sort of actual, in terms of the operational reaction, we would hope that all of those incidents have been reported through to the NIEA's pollution lines, and they will investigate those. Sorry, Owen.
I can add to that. So we've set up an interagency protocol, and that's been quite active to make sure that we're engaged fully with councils, environmental health officers, so that and I'm going to be pretty clear. This is about reporting and providing advice to people who are going to be affected, because at the minute there's no treatment, as well as potentially the in-pilot research. I'm setting up with SIB a small business research initiative which will run for 2 years. Phase 1 will probably go through 24, and then it'll be relevant projects will be selected for phase 2. So that's to deal with the blooms as they happen, but it's still going to take 2 years, and we have to be very wary that we have been provided by a lot of suppliers potential treatments for blue-green algae. But we need to be clear that those treatments themselves don't cause further degradation for the environment and also affect other sectors within, so for instance, fisheries. So some of the solutions that have been provided are to add chemicals or so on. We don't know what the effects are going to be, so we're making sure that's okay.
Fair enough. Just finally on Loughney, I know there's been a lot of conversation and the Minister talked about it as well, and it mentioned how he didn't want that to become a distraction, but about the ownership of it. Do you see that as a block to how we kind of find a solution for Loughney, a long-term solution?
I mean, I'm genuinely focused on dealing with the green-blue algae issues at the moment. I haven't given any advice to the Minister on ownership because our focus has really been on the environmental impacts. I think the Minister had said to you on Tuesday that he doesn't see that as changing the ownership is not going to solve the green-blue algae issue right now. I also, the Loughney Partnership have been provided with a grant from the lottery to look at various management aspects of the loch. And one of the things that I think they're going to look at, one of the things they are going to look at is the ownership question. So, that will be an interesting piece of research in that, they are the closest stakeholders, and it would just be really interesting to see their assessment of how much difference that would make. So I suppose from my point of view and from the advice I'm providing to the Minister, really a watching brief on the ownership issue.
That's fair enough. Thank you for that there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. John Blair.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose I could start with Nay, but only one to say to everyone here, it's good to see you. The Loughney conversation are the parts of it that have been explained to us today, including what might be called a water quality action plan coming forward. And I'll relate this directly to the ownership of the loch issue and address that as well, if I may. I assume that action plan, if we call it that, will look at the waters and waterways beyond Loughney and include the catchment area for Loughney, which is crucial here. The problem on the bed of the loch is being carried there by the tributaries and waterways and watercourses around the shores of that loch, and with that in mind, we'd need to be very careful in the minds of some of us and some representative groups as well, that before we go running off spending tens of millions of pounds on ownership issues, we might want to address it. That money would be better spent trying to address the problems that are causing the blue-green algae in the first instance, and the levels of phosphorus 7 times above recommended levels, for example. So can we be assured that plan, when it comes, will be all-encompassing in terms of the catchment area and the other water courses? Because I have spent a lot of time since I became an MLA dealing with pollution incidents in my constituency, and of course that's very clearly in the catchment area, and only recently, days ago, more reported pollution of the 6 Mile water in the Antrim area.
Yes, it has to deal with the whole catchment. There's no point just dealing with the loch itself. And this is really visible in Loughney. It's not just a Loughney problem. So, there is a need to look at management practices through, around all water bodies. I suppose the other point as well is this is an action plan in terms of water quality, but that in itself needs to be seen in a much wider setting. I mean, Loughney, lots of protections, so we need to take those into account. We need to think about how we protect the environment around the loch, not just the water in it. And again, you can extend that out to all the other water bodies that are being affected, and the whole of the river basins. So it is, Loughney was a really stark example of how we've not got the balance right. But this isn't just a Loughney problem.
Yep. I'm really grateful, Liz, to hear it being put in those terms, because, when we know it's a problem that was 40 years in the making, when we know the levels of phosphorus, according to the Department's own figures, are 7 times what they should be, and nitrates 1.5 times what they should be. We know what's causing it, we know where it's coming from, it's time to address it, and some of us have said repeatedly that the situation is so stark that every policy and every practice needs to be on the table for review. Otherwise, we're destroying our nature and our natural resources, literally the air that we breathe and the water that we drink in this case. And there's a huge cost as well that has to be quantified in relation to putting all of that right. If I could move, and I'm staying on water, to the public angling estate, and some of you will know I had some involvement with that in a previous life. It seems to me that the public angling estate has been seriously diminished, both through the non-stocking of waters affected by the zebra mussel issue, and also by decisions taken very deliberately by the department in terms of suspending, freezing or removing community outreach grants to try to get people utilising that public angling estate. Now, I know these things are often seen as low-hanging fruit, but there are also ways to increase representativeness in contact with government, attract more women, for example, to angling, more people from harder to reach communities, socially disadvantaged, and so on and so on. And that was the practice of that grant system. When you remove that, you remove some of the community involvement, Liz, that you yourself referred to earlier on. So I want to know specifically, is it the longer term intention to reinstate those waters affected by the zebra mussel issue? For example, by stocking them from other means or using other resources? Is it the intention to restart that frozen community outreach programme to better connect with the public? And also, if there is a resource saving from the lack of, and I assume that there is, if there's 30 waters not being stocked currently, then there must be some quantifiable resource saving in there somewhere. And could that saving be used and directed to what was previously a community outreach programme?
Okay, I'm going to ask Owen to answer all of those.
Well, I'll take the public angling estate. We have currently 89 waters. 27 of them we manage, or actively manage or lease out on behalf of Northern Ireland Water. About 26, 27 are stocked of that. Typically about 120,000 fish per year. So the zebra mussels, Liz has already covered the reason why that suspension had to happen, because invasive species are insidious and a real danger to our environment. So the public angling estate has not been stocked. We are currently refining options for the Minister to look at about stocking in 24, about what happens in the future to the stocking and the public angling estate. We're concurrently also just finishing off in the next few months a review of a public angling estate, because there hasn't been a review of a public angling estate since 1992 in the Department of Agriculture in Northern Ireland. So we have expanded the public angling estate, but we haven't done, I think, the due process at times to look at the resources to manage it, to provide a quality service, and to understand what actually are the objectives to be accomplished. And you've mentioned some of them, so that we have the right waters in the right places for the right people, that sort of area. I'd also say that in addition to the public angling estate, there is a healthy private angling estate as well. So it's not just public angling estate, and they contribute a lot to angling. The zebra mussel is, it's one of these issues we're facing in our environment, because our environment has a low resilience because of other issues being discussed. As for the community grants programme that was run was a pilot that was signed off in 2016 for 3 years and for up to £60,000, and it was approved by DOF. That pilot finished in 2022, acknowledging that there was a hiatus with COVID, which extended the period when there was no grants issued. So it met its conditions from DOF for the business case. There was a post-project evaluation committee on that. Why there has been no further work on that is because the community grants and the outreach for angling are discretionary activity. And obviously if the budgetary pressures faced, particularly in the last financial year, that was sort of a non-starter. I think we also have to acknowledge that with the pressures, we have to focus on our statutory obligations, and we probably haven't done enough with NASCO and the salmon conservation. So limited resources, it's going to be difficult decisions. As I've said, we're going to be providing papers to the Minister for his consideration, and it'll feed into his priorities. Yeah. But it is not off the table. It's just these are the conditions that have been set, why there's nothing at the minute, and it'll be for the Minister to consider in the future.
Would you agree, though, that it's in the interests of the Department and all of us to engage the best we can with our communities, especially those that are harder to reach or underrepresented, so as to increase the appreciation not only of what government provides, and the public angle estate's unique in these islands, but also to get people outdoors and active, more appreciative of nature, more likely to want to protect our natural resources, and therefore there should be ultimately, even if it's hard to measure, a net gain from all of these activities for what I think you described there, Owen, as I do have some involvement in it from the past, as you know, but it's an absolutely minimal cost in terms of overall government expenditure to reach more people and showcase what government can do and how people can connect with it.
And I have no disagreement with that, and I think this is one of the areas I think there wasn't clarity when Decal, DERA, or Decal, DARD and DOE merged, and DFC and Sports NI, Sports NI and responsibility for sport and angling went to DFC, because very fundamentally in DERA, our statutory obligations are about the conservation protection, and therefore when there's limited resources and staffing resources, those are the decisions that have been made in the last year in that context. As I said, we will provide the options to the Minister, and he'll make those decisions obviously in his priorities, but I accept what you've said.
Thank you, and I think we can further explore how fisheries and forestry are really very well placed to deliver with the public, not just to the public. Finally, if I may, with your permission, Chair, Shane's division, environmental waste was mentioned. Does that include waste management generally across Northern Ireland? I mentioned to the previous team who presented this morning about the achieving consistency across our areas in Northern Ireland, what progress might have been made there, if we could just ask that again briefly, and how far we have moved towards achieving the removal of commingling from our waste systems, and doing better, and how government can help councils, for example, achieve that.
No, thanks for the question, because it gives us an opportunity to promote the consultation due to launch today on that. And the consultation obviously is rethinking our resources, measures for climate action and circular economy in Northern Ireland. And part of those will be measures looking at to improve commonality in collections from households, as well as improving recycling for non-household municipal waste. And obviously there's a lot of proposals in there, and we'll await the outcome of those responses, and they will help inform our policy options going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But consultation is a while in the making, isn't it?
Right.
It's a wee while in the making.
It is, but it is very complex, and it covers quite a lot of areas. We are looking at a very informed sector and a very invested sector, and it's set out in that way that those responding can respond to the areas that impact on them. There's not an obligation to respond to every question in there, but we hope at the end of that we will be better informed going forward.
Thanks. Patsy McLone.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you so far for your contributions. I'll start off with something that's near and dear to my own heart, because I was reared on the shores of Loch Ness and live very close to it at the minute where I am too. And the stink coming off the loch, even though I live about a mile presently, as a crow flies last year, was pretty poor, I'll tell you that. Now, just if I could, there's a number of things that I wanted just a wee bit of clarity on. The water quality management that you've referred to, I presume you're talking about how or what measures can be taken to look at, if you like, everything that's flowing into the loch, all the tributaries and rivers that are flowing into the loch, to see what can be done there to, if we like, filter some of the stuff that's going into the loch. Now, we know there's 40 years in the making. You rightly referred to it there, Liz. That's very important. So I'd be just a wee bit more expansion on that, please. Obviously that'll be done in consultation with the various interests around the loch, and Loch Ness Partnership is one of those, but there are multiple others, organisations, environmental groups, etc., around the Lochshore that are deeply interested and passionate about retaining what is something that's very, very dear to us all. Now, could I just ask, now, the point that you raised there, Owen, and thank you, by the way, for your cooperation over the last year. The Small Business Research Project, I'm sure all of us, including the department, have received numerous representations from different people. I had one recently about the use of ultrasound, and I think that'll be coming your direction, corresponds next week. I just met the man, I didn't know him before now. Ultrasound to be used for the break-up of the algae bloom. Is it the case, and I think if it is the case, that what you're doing is trying to determine what's the best way of dealing with it, because there's a whole host of people out there of different ideas, and I know some have been used down south, maybe not to as great an effect as what was broadcast. So is the purpose of that Small Business Research Project, is it to sift through that and to basically come up with, right, what's the best way to deal with this? And we're hearing all these ideas, which are in fact real and effective, and which are maybe just not so real or effective. Is that the purpose of that?
So the SBRI gives a really structured approach how to actually look at this technology.
This is the SBRI,
the Small Business Research Initiative.
Yes.
So the phase one, it'll be a tender process or application process. People will come in for those ideas, and certainly the list of people who have come to the department last year, they will be, notified of this SBRI. That'll be assessed, and between 3 and 6 projects will be given a certain amount of money to develop those concepts. And then at the end of phase one, 1 or 2 will be taken forward with an increased grant to take it to pilot or trial stage. That's not to say we wait 2 years. If something comes out of stage 1 or earlier that could actually be maybe fast-tracked, we'll look at that. I think I've looked at the technologies. I've got a history back, from way back in dealing with wastewater, etc. And some of these technologies are very good for very small areas, or for areas that don't have wildlife. So a reservoir, which is for water quality, and it's not about the it's not about the environment or the biodiversity, because it's man-made. So we just have to be very careful that we don't create extra problems. So it might be that we don't get a solution that's extensively going to deal with the whole area of the loch, because if you looked at satellite images last year, the blooms were extensive, miles long, and they moved across the loch, depending on the wind, in 24 hours. But it might be that some of these assist in local areas to minimise the aesthetic and impacts on recreation. So that's what the SBRI is going to be looking at, and in a structured approach with a technical panel to filter down and then take forward the better suggestions.
Okay. Just in terms of your first question there about the water quality, and what we have to do, it's less about filtering stuff that goes into Loch Ness, it's more about stopping things moving into the rivers that feed the loch. So it is not, we can't just kind of filter all the tributaries flowing in. We have to move right back up and look at what's going into, the Blackwater, the 6 Mile water, whatever, and try and deal with that at source.
This is a serious problem, because we see the stuff on, it comes up regular in a Facebook feed that I have, there's the stuff going in, slurry going right into the river, and from what I'm hearing, it takes quite a while before we have a response from NIEA to address it. And not to address it. Addressing it is making sure that it doesn't happen again, and the only way to make sure that doesn't happen again is how it's dealt with through the courts. So that's another thing. But there have been some, why I mentioned or suggested filtration, and this will probably go into the SBRI process as well. There have been people with ideas who come forward about that too, so that's good that there's a mechanism, an avenue that they can be pointed in the direction, signposted to. That's good. Can I just maybe move to, there's 2 or 3 things. I'll stick with the loch for a wee moment. The ownership of the loch, while it's very emotional attachment to that, and buying something back that maybe wasn't paid for in the first place, that's another argument or another historical view. But can I just ask there, presumably that the department would want to do due diligence around any transaction that would be moving over, because I don't know whether, I know last year a local solicitor was talking about legal actions around the algae bloom, how it was affecting people's businesses, how it was affecting their trade, how it was affecting even their leisure facilities or whatever. So therefore there may well be legal cases, and the department may or may not be cited as a respondent or co-respondent in those, as could be the owner of the loch. So clearly you would want to do a sifting process on that before you would go the route of any acquisition or sale. I'm just marking that there so that it's out there. Then if we could maybe just move on to something quite different, if I could please. I saw the reference to peatland restoration. Now, I'm genuinely inquisitive as to how that could be suggested to be done, because the peatlands have been acquired over many thousands of years, or built up over many thousands of years. So I'm just a bit inquisitive as to how the restoration could be done.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll take that one. So at the moment, the peatland strategy is has been consulted on and is sitting in a draft ready to take to the Minister, and we're hoping to do that fairly soon. And that strategy sort of sets out the policy intention, of what our long-term goals are for peatland restoration. And it is, you're absolutely right, it's a massive undertaking. We've got 70% of the land here's peatland, and 80% of that's considered to be degraded. So it's emitting carbon, and it's not the biodiversity on it isn't good either, just because it is so degraded. So we're currently looking with SIV, Strategic Investment Board, at how we could take forward peatland restoration on a landscape scale and what the cost of that might include. And until we undertake that process, that'll inform us then taking forward a business case to look at the best model of peatland restoration. This is closely aligned with the Climate Action Plan that I think you heard about earlier on, because peatland restoration is a key factor in reducing our carbon reduction, greenhouse gas emissions as part of the land use change and forestry sector in the Climate Action Plan. So you're absolutely right. How we go about peatland restoration has to be decided on such a large scale. There are some small scale projects going on at the moment, and we're working with environmental non-government organisations on that, but scaling it up is a big challenge.
If you're presenting a business case, and Chair, with your forbearance, if you're presenting a business case to do what?
This case will provide us with the financial cover to take forward the restoration projects. But
can you elaborate a wee bit as to what on the ground that actually means?
Yeah, I know you're asking for how do you actually restore a peatland.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not an environmental scientist, so I cannot give you.
That's okay,
I can give you kind of see Owen, who is an environmental scientist, is bursting to come in.
Former sort of. I think. I was at a visit for Owen Caffrey at Glenwera Hill Farm, where they've been doing, on the ground and looking at how to restore peatland, and it's actually a fascinating visit about how they've actually done it, on the ground. So if you're looking about how the mechanics are doing it, there might be actually options to go and visit, because I think, it wasn't my area because I'm rated fisheries, but I found it fascinating about the benefits from just looking at the land in a different way, and what the farm manager did for some of that peatlands to actually improve.
Is it small scale or large scale?
Well, I would say it's small scale, and I think the challenge. I think the advantage is if you can prove the techniques and work out what not to do, which I think from our demonstration they had been quite successful. Then it makes it less straightforward, but not simple to actually scale up. You're not going to repeat mistakes.
I mean, the one that I've seen in action, it is actually an engineering solution, hydrological solution, in that they're actually engineering so that they can re-wet bogland. So there's that sort of hard engineering in there, and then there are also other interventions to try and increase biodiversity, bring certain species back in. So it's a whole family of things. NIEA when they give evidence, should be able to talk you through some of the specifics.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Chair. Aye.
You're passing that on to NIEA just as your colleagues pass
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
on to you, okay. William Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In relation, you're very welcome. In relation to plan applications, and I'm aware that there's some 300 agricultural applications in the system that in effect are not been, we're told, and I got a letter back from NIA saying that they were being looked at on a case-to-case basis, but that was always the case. I don't think that has changed, because there's no other way of looking at applications other than on a case-to-case basis. But from you's reduced your guidelines in the 19th of December, I think, to 0.08%. Many applications have been responded, many consultations would have been responded to in that time, because I'm told there's none.
Okay, I'm really sorry, that is a question for NIEA, who provide the advice on behalf of the department. I just don't know. The planning, all of the planning advice provided to the planning authorities comes through NIEA out to the councils, and I think that the 0.08 figure is a bit more nuanced and complex than that. It's not that sort of blanket. So I think that certainly I've seen a presentation from NIEA to UFU sort of explaining how that works. So I'm sorry, Chair, but that really is a NIEA one. I can't answer that. Sorry.
In relation to the ammonia strategy, and then the Chairman already has asked you a question on that, it is vitally important that that is put in place, because in effect those 300 applications, some of them for improvements to farm buildings that are up 50 years, that would be more environmentally friendly than new buildings. You know, farming is stuck in a, can't move forward without that being a strategy being achieved.
I mean, you're absolutely right. The strategy is important, because it's the strategy, if we can use the strategy to get on a general downward trajectory in terms of ammonia, it will unlock the potential for development. If we know that we're on that downward trajectory, that the ammonia in the environment is reducing, it means that we will be able to look, or we will be able to advise the planning authorities to look more sympathetically upon any application, because even where we have, even where we see, you know, increases from individual applications, if we know that the background levels are falling, it all becomes doable within a package. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The new environment strategy is the key to unlocking a lot. Sorry, the new ammonia strategy. Too many strategies. The new ammonia strategy is the way to unlocking a lot of that.
That's okay. Thank you.
Richard, just to follow on that, Chair, unless that the 0.08 figure changes within the ammonia strategy, that's still not going to be a benefit to the farming community. I have people in West Tyrone, for example, that wanted to put up a new milking parlour. Now, they were able to demonstrate that that would reduce their ammonia levels maybe by up to 90%, but then they couldn't meet the target that was set at this minute in time. Now, it's much better for that farmer to be able to build his new milking parlour, reduces ammonia levels as the current are by 90%, surely it'd be much better to the environment, rather than having to go on in the way that he's going at this minute in time and reduce nothing because of this figure that's set that impossible to meet within the farming community. So I think unless there's going to be a change there, then that the strategy is not going to mean much to the farming community whenever it comes to upgrading their buildings and all of that. And you did say in your opening remarks that the ammonia strategy was to help the farming community to thrive and be sustainable. That cannot happen unless that figure changes within the strategy.
Okay, there aren't any figures in the strategy. And again, this is where I think a briefing from NIEA on this would be really helpful. In terms of the strategy, what the strategy is attempting to do is sort of find ways to reduce across all sectors, so it doesn't it doesn't in itself set any specific ceilings. It looks at actions that we can take in order to reduce outputs. So, for example, it's looking at low emissions spreading and making recommendations around that. It's looking at other manure management measures. So those hard numbers are what is given in terms of planning advice from the department to the planning authorities. That's picked up in the new operational protocol, new standing advice. It is not a hard and fast 0.08 figure, and I think the conversation between NIEA and UFU was really useful last week in terms of setting out the nuances of that. I can assure you that the strategy isn't intended to set those sorts of levels. The strategy is intended to look at, how do we reduce levels generally, because I think that then starts to unlock the planning development.
The problem is those figures will be set at some stage, even if it's outside of the strategy. It is not, and again, I am sorry, I'm well outside of my area of expertise in terms of this 0.08 figure. It is more nuanced than that, Chair, and I think that maybe a briefing from the air quality people in NIEA would be helpful, just in terms of explaining what that is and how it works. But it is part of the planning advice that's provided. It is not part of the ammonia strategy. But yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you that this is all part of a package. But what I am saying is, I think it would be worth digging behind those figures, and that's the figure for the case by case. It's not. We're still working through the evidence on the call for evidence for the operational protocols. So I probably, as I say, I've reached the limit of my knowledge and understanding on that one, I'm afraid, Chair.
Yeah, the fact is, look, there's a figure there, and if that figure's not reached by the applicant, in a sense, then his application isn't approved. So somebody sets that figure. We can have an engagement with NIEA. NIEA will turn around and tell us, well, we have a figure that we've been given, we have to work to that figure. So therefore, who then is responsible for setting the figure that NIEA has to work from?
And I suppose that's where the call for evidence is, where last year we went out and asked, was there any additional evidence that we could incorporate in the operational protocol to help make those decisions? So that information, we did receive information back from a number of organisations regarding that, and that's being considered at the moment for the development of the new.
So tell me, we're assuming that figure comes from the operational protocol at present. Is that set by you or by NIEA?
The figures, well, the operational protocol will be put from us to the Minister. The figures that are in the operational protocol, in the emerging operational protocol, because nothing is decided or finalised, are not that hard and fast. So I think rather than a single figure, I suspect there will be a table of different applications and different ways with a whole set of different figures. That will be in a document published by the department that then will be used as NIEA offer advice to planning authorities. So it will all be signed off from the Minister, but the person who will actually press the send button to the Minister will probably be me, yes, rather than the agency.
Currently, we're working under the figure of 0.8 as 0.08, apologies, that has been highlighted by William and Tom. Who has set that figure?
That's been in place since
December.
Is that the one? As I say, the protocol is not my area of expertise at all. But in terms of the December, if it's the December figure, as far as I'm aware, that was set, that was a figure used by the case by case by NIEA, which was taken from a report that was agreed by the JNCC. The Joint National Council for Conservation. It's all of the UK's nature conservation areas did a piece of research. I'm sorry, I would love to be more helpful, but I mean genuinely.
Yeah, but we really need to be clear on this, because if
Yeah.
NIE are coming before us, we need to be absolutely clear in what we're saying. So you're saying that it was not your section that set that 0.08 figure?
I'm saying that the 0.08 figure was developed by NIEA based on scientific advice that they had and scientific research that they had. It would have been, in terms of the EF submissions, the then head of the group would have been involved in drafting those EF submissions for the permanent secretary, but the knowledge and expertise around that number certainly sits within NIEA.
Okay. All right, guys. John, you want to...
A very quick one, Chair. I wanted to point out that some of us who are members of the Climate Action All-Party Group here took a visit to it's immediately adjacent to Dungonal Reservoir, one of the waters of the Public Angle Estate at Cargan in County Antrim, where there's been an extensive and successful peatlands restoration scheme done in conjunction with Northern Ireland Water, RSPB and other environmental bodies, but I'd highly recommend it for a visit.
A large area?
It's a large area of the entire scheme, but there's good access from the reservoir where you can easily see some of the successes of the scheme. It's just outside Cargan in County Antrim, right on the edge of the glen. So it's a particularly scenic area to visit as well, of course.
Okay.
But there's good product there to see as well.
Okay, we'll discuss that around potential visit. Okay, one final point, just, and it's around Movenaher Fish Farm again. And my understanding is you can't transfer fish out of that into other rivers or lakes or wherever you stock because of the zebra mussels. Does that include even, because I noticed there were almost 30,000 fish culled out of that fish farm in November. Does that mean you can't put those fish into areas that already have zebra mussels? Because I'm thinking that there are a load of fishing lakes that have zebra mussels that would probably welcome that sort of stock, but I'm assuming legally you can't do it. Is that reasonable?
So when this came to light, the 23rd of June, I convened sort of a technical advisory panel to inform me in my decision making, and that was one of my first questions, because there are certainly 2 lakes in the Fermanagh area that would have zebra mussels, or what we suspect are zebra mussels, because it could be other types of invasive species that we're seeing across Europe and UK and British Isles. Another one called quagga mussel, which might become more prominent. The legal advice we got back was it's an absolute offence, we can't. And I think that part of that is because we don't know, we need to make sure we're sure about what we've got, because it could be genetic differences and it could be different species, because this is very close. And secondly, it would be then you could actually have perverse behaviour where people start to introduce mussels somewhere to actually get them put in. So that was one of my first questions, got legal advice, and initially, just after we had detected, because we were using borehole water, which was clear, wasn't river ban water, to flush and move fish. And we asked the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute for their scientific advice on that, plus legal advice, and they said that those precautions weren't substantive enough for us to be able to comply with the law, and we had legal advice. So this is a difficult situation, but I would equate this to if there was an animal health issue. There's an animal health issue with an outbreak of a disease. It's very acute. We deal with it. We actually kill a lot of stock to make sure it doesn't spread. Invasive species are more gradual and insidious, and because we probably haven't taken it as serious, we've allowed invasive species to progress, and we haven't maybe been as strict. So zebra mussels have moved up the Shannon to Lough Erne and across Northern Ireland. Part of my concern last summer was that Mavanerger provides fish for over 20 waterways across Northern Ireland. There was a high risk if we got it wrong, we were actually accelerating the problem. So we are working with AFBI to get a project to look at treatment protocols so we can comply with the law. I'm going to just, when I'm on here, just clarify, it wasn't my inbox, it was embargoed to Food Standards Agency. I hadn't picked it up with all the other emails, but I can confirm that press release is released, and the FSA said safe to eat fish from the loch if it's properly gutted and fillets or rinsed with clean water to remove any contamination. That applies to recreational anglers. So that's on, well, certainly the BBC website now as well.
Okay. All right, look, thank you very much for your presentation, for taking the questions, much appreciated, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you and have you back in not too distant future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members. Move on to agenda item 7 now, which is the period products, Department of Environment and Rural Affairs, Specified Public Bodies Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024. I refer you to pages 90 to 100 in your pack. The SL1 period products, Department of Environment, Rural Affairs, Specified Public Bodies Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024. Clark's memo is at page 91 to 92 of your pack. Highlights that the Period Products Free Provision Act Northern Ireland was made by the Northern Ireland Assembly in 2022 and requires that free period products will be made available from May 2024 in all public bodies. All Northern Ireland departments will be laying similar regulations. Draft SR relates to the provision of period products for specified agriculture, environment and rural affairs buildings. The rule will be laid before the Assembly under the affirmative resolution procedure, and it is anticipated that it will come into operation as soon as approved. Just to remind you, the affirmative resolution procedure means that the SR is made and laid before the Assembly, but has no effect in law until affirmed by the resolution of the Assembly. One aspect I did ask in this was, because it's involving all departments, would it come as one? But I think it's going to come individually, is it? Or are we sure,
well,
Clark?
We will have each department has individual regulations, but it's, there is discussion as to whether TEO will lead the debate.
Okay.
That's not, I didn't hear a final answer on that yet.
But just all we have to do at this stage is approve the SR.
Yeah.
I think at the time, didn't it go through education as the actual legislation? I think they took the lead.
Was it DFC or education?
It was education, guys.
Yeah, I think that was
Chair.
Yeah, that was at the end of the last mandate, whenever there was so much legislation.
Yeah.
Some of it went to different committees than it might have otherwise have done.
Any other comments or queries? No? Okay then, I'll put the motion that the committee has considered a proposal by the department to make a statutory rule. The Period Products Department of Environment and Rural Affairs Specified Public Bodies Regulations Northern Ireland 2024, and agrees that it is content for the department to make the rule. All agreed?
Great.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 8 is SR 2024-16. The Farming for Generations Scheme Regulations Northern Ireland 2024 and SR 2024-31. The Farming for Generations Scheme Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. We're now going to consider the last of the backlog of the SRs. We have two connected SRs to consider. Firstly, SR 2024-16, the Farming for Generations Scheme Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. The SL1 is at pages 102 to 108 of your pack, and the SR 2024-16 is at pages 108 to 115 of your pack. The SR is subject to the negative resolution procedure. Purpose of this SR was to introduce the Farming for Generations pilot scheme. Pilot scheme provides for payments to be made by the Department to eligible farm businesses in relation to the Succession Planning Consultation Grant, Succession Business Restructuring Grant and the Successor Development Grant. However, members, you will recall we could not consider this SR last week as the Examiner of Statutory Rules had drawn attention to the SR in her second report. This can be found at pages 116 to 124 of your pack. The regulations made provision for a power of entry in Regulation 9.2, which Ms Kelly queried with the Department, and now the amended regulations SR 2024/31 have been laid. The papers in relation to that SR can be found in your table papers pack at pages 15 to 21. The SR is subject to negative resolutions. The purpose of the amendment is to remove the powers of inspection, which on further review have been deemed unnecessary for the Farming for the Generations pilot scheme. The ESR has confirmed that she is content with this approach. I propose that the committee is now briefed by the Department official, George Moffat, regarding the SRs, and members can ask any questions that they have. Slightly complex, I think. George, you want to come to the table? I'll let you explain it because my understanding might be slightly different to yours, so if you want to explain why we have two SRs here as opposed to one.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the original SR was made and contained powers of entry that really was linked to control of the scheme, that officials of the department would have entry to the farm business to carry out checks related to payments made for the scheme. The examiner challenged that requirement, and we clarified it then with the officials developing the scheme, and the controls for the scheme itself will be very much around receipts and attendance at training courses. So powers of entry to farm business to carry out those checks aren't required, and that's the amendment then to remove those section 9 and 11.1c from the original regulation.
And just to be clear, my understanding is we have to approve the two regulations today because one of them was already in vogue, the one that the Examiner of Statutory Rules had some queries on. So now you're bringing back an amendment. So because the other one was invoked, we have to approve it as well. Is that reasonable?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Members, are you clear, or do you want to ask any questions? Sorry, Anya.
Just a quick one from me, Chair. I note that the old land mobility scheme closed last August, and obviously it's taken us 6-7 months to get the new scheme in operation. But was there any rationale as to why it's taken that length of time?
Well, the development of the Farming for the Generations has been going on since really 2022, and just in terms of consultation with various stakeholders to put that together and to get to a point that the pilot scheme was ready to go. It took two really now to do that.
And in terms of the funding for this new scheme, and I also note that it's coming from Treasury's ring-fenced agri support budget, how much, and look at respect if you don't have the figures in front of you, but how much is being deducted from that budget?
For the pilot scheme, yeah, for the pilot Farming for the Generation, so it's a 2-year pilot. There's approximately 150,000 set aside for that pilot.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Okay, members, now put the question on both of these SRs. Thank you, George. The Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2024/16, the Farming for the Generation Scheme Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Members content? Okay, and I now put the second one, that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2024/31, the Farming for the Generation Scheme Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 9, which is correspondence. We remain in public session. Now refer you to the correspondence memo in your packs at pages 126 to 127 and correspondence at pages 128 to 160 of your pack. Just a few items that I want to draw to your attention. 9.1 is on pages 128 to 138. It's from the Commission of Economic Paris. I'll not try to pronounce that in French. Regarding plastic pollution, United Nations Environment Assembly has established an intergovernmental negotiating committee focused on ending plastic pollution. The committee has met 3 times and plans to meet again in April 2024 and at the end of 2024. The correspondent, Philippe Bolo, from the National Assembly in Paris Commission, is working towards the creation of a coalition of parliamentarians on the issue and wrote to the committee requesting an MLA contact with awareness expertise of plastic pollution issues. Members, not so sure it's something we want to appoint someone to as a committee of the Northern Ireland Assembly. I'm open to your suggestions, but maybe we should just ask them to keep in contact with us and keep us informed, unless anybody has. Patsy, you looking on the committee? Anybody any other thoughts? Are you happy that we're kept informed? Just.
I'm happy we keep informed.
All right, thank you.
I wonder who afforded Declan a knighthood.
Sorry?
I wonder who afforded Declan a knighthood. Sir Declan MacLear.
Oh yeah. Okay. 9.2, I refer to memo from the clerk for the Committee for Justice at pages 139 to 140 of your pack. This is in relation to correspondence from Barry McDonald QC and legal proceedings in respect of residential properties at Victoria Square, Belfast. Committee for Justice is informing us that it has agreed to write to the Department of Justice and to copy in the head of the Civil Service and Committee for Finance. Are you content, because we wrote to the Department on this issue, Department of Agriculture, are you content that we wait for that response?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. 9.3, correspondence dated 27th of February is in your packs at 141 to 142 regarding the DEFRA UK-wide statutory instrument of retained EU law, Revocation and Reform Act 2023, Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Revocation Regulations 2024. A summary of the provisions in the ESA are included at Annex A of page 142 of your pack. DEFRA have confirmed that this ESA revokes 73 pieces of law previously known as retained EU law and is being revoked because it is no longer operable or suitable for purpose in the UK. The ESA includes environmental and animal health legislation. DERA policy teams have completed their review of the ESAs and confirmed that the legislation contained therein is either defunct or not applicable to Northern Ireland, and the correspondence states that the Minister has given consent to the making of this ESA. Don't think we have any huge remit as a committee in this, members, but it's for noting, so unless anybody has any specific questions, there's quite a lot of legislation, but the department have obviously considered it and deemed that it's not relevant any longer in Northern Ireland. So you're content to note?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, thank you. 9.4, pages 143 to 146 of your pack dated the 1st of March 2024 regarding the Fair Dealing Obligation Milk Regulations 2024. The department is advising that the committee that DEFRA has led these regulations at Westminster. The regulations will introduce mandatory written contracts across the EU dairy sector and will apply to all new and existing contracts between first purchasers and milk producers. These regulations do not engage Sections 24 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998, and therefore there is no requirement for the statutory instrument to be laid before the Assembly. You will note that there will be some costs for both milk producers and processors following the introduction of the regulations. These relate to familiarisation, providing information about the new rules and reissuing of contracts. There will be a period of 3 months between the making of the regulations and then them coming into force for the existing contracts. This will be 12 months to allow the dairy sector time to adapt and minimise market disruption. There are no costs anticipated for DAERA. There will be estimated costs to Northern Ireland dairy industry of less than £1 million. I'm just slightly concerned of the impact on this on dairy farmers with contracts, and I don't know, members, whether we want to ask the Ulster Farmers Union, because they have a dairy section, whether for their opinion or view on it, if you're content, or is there any other?
I'll explain it better.
Yeah. Are there any other views around here? Because this is the first I've heard of this. William, I don't know, you're a dairy farmer. Have you heard anything?
No, I didn't.
Around it? But it does seem to put an obligation on dairy farmers and those that they supply to have a formal contract. So, are you happy we write to UFU asking for?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. 9.5, I refer to pages 147 and 148 of your pack. Find a copy of an email dated the 1st of March 2024 from the Chief Executive of the Maritime Belfast Trust to the Minister Muir regarding the launch of the Belfast Waterfront Promenade Framework by the Belfast Waterfront Task Force, which includes DAERA. This is regarding the regeneration of the waterfront from Sailortown to Ormeau Park, and plans to involve creating a pilot waterfront design panel to take forward a people-centric waterfront city. Members, just a note, all content. 9.6, correspondence received on the 1st of March, pages 149 to 161 of your pack, from an individual highlighting various issues of environmental and ecological concern, including the blue-green algae, the environment, ecology, food waste, farming sustainability, peatlands, rewilding and water policy. There is a substantial amount of information that members may wish to use for future reference. Yeah. Anybody any comment or happy to note? No. Most of the issues we're already discussing and taking forward anyway. Okay, members, agenda item 10, the draft forward work programme. Pages 162 to 164 of your pack. Draft forward work programme confirmed to the 21st of March, which is the last meeting before Easter recess. You've already noted the departmental briefings and proposed briefings from Ulster Farmers Union, Northern Ireland Environment Link and the Office of Environmental Protection. At next week's meeting we will have departmental briefings from Northern Ireland Environment Agency and Forest Service, and a closed session from the Research and Public Finance Scrutiny Unit regarding scrutiny of the budget. In particular, it is planned that we will discuss arrangements for a strategic planning day after Easter. You intend to note the draft forward work programme for now?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other business? Members, it is International Women's Day on Friday the 8th of March 2024. Are you content that the committee team quote post on X, formerly Twitter? I think that means re-quoting the post. Yeah, I think we're not allowed to say that now. A photo from the Speaker's office and Assembly to indicate the committee's support for this important day. You all content with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. You will also note the legacy report from the previous committee on breaking the glass ceiling. The plan is to keep these challenging issues for women within the sector on the radar. So that's something we can look at in our forward work programme. Okay, date and time of next meeting. Sorry, was there any other business from any member? Apologies.
In relation to the 300 plan applications that are stuck in the system, because of no ammonia strategy, they're telling us that till there is an ammonia strategy in place, really they're going to go nowhere. Should we be requesting
Sorry, folks.
Should we request the NAA to come to the committee, or are they coming?
They're coming.
Yeah.
We even maybe just make a written submission to NIA just specifically on the case of those applications, the individual applications.
They tell us that they're looking at them on an individual case-by-case basis, but sure, that has always been the case. There's no other way of looking at that than only on a case.
So am I right in the basis being that there are quite a number, someone has said 300 cases, whatever number it is within the planning system that's waiting on an NIA response?
Right.
Is it reasonable then to ask how many of those have actually been responded to?
That's fair enough, but you'll find there's none or very few. Because I'm told.
But is that the basis of it, or is there anything else that I've missed there that we should be asking?
Well, that's the crux of it at the minute.
Yeah,
but a lot of them, or most of them, from what I find, are just still sitting. As you know.
No, that's well. Happy enough?
Okay.
Sorry.
Chair, do you wish us to write a letter to them, or do you wish us to ask them to cover it in their briefing?
Well, I think it would be useful if we had some response to that particular point before they came.
Yeah.
So that at least we know where we are. Okay. Any other business?
Nope.
No. Okay. Date, time and place of next meeting will be on Thursday the 14th of March 2024, 10 a.m. in room 21. Thank you very much for your attendance. However, I would ask you to maybe stay for 10 minutes if you can to receive a short informal briefing in private from the Head of Communications, Michael Cairns. Okay.
Committee Room 21. Sound.